Ah. They making new laws every day, and those of the master they throw away. The things they go about and preach, it's not what they teach, and no one seems to care. The whole world lives in fear, just despair everywhere.
Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna kullu rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. In the name of the Almighty God, most gracious and most merciful, we give praise and thanks to our Creator as we gather together to worship in spirit and in truth. And so we remember all our brothers and sisters when we gather that are of different denominations. And we invite them to worship with us and to hear the message that is inspired for them to have. To my Christian brothers and sisters, peace be unto you. You know, for that's what Jesus always said. Jesus never said good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. He says peace be unto you, which means salam alaikum. To my Hindu brothers and sisters, namaste. To my Rastafarian brothers and sisters, Jah peace and Jah love. And to my Muslim brothers and sisters and all other denominations, I greet you with the greetings of peace in the Arabic language. As-salam alaikum. Brothers and sisters, as usual, we have our different events, and they are always significant to our ethnicity in this country in which we live, that is multiracial and multi-ethnic and multi-religious. And when we are a multi-religious society, it is very important that we try our best to understand each other's way of life. For when you belong to a religion, it's not just praying to God, but it's a way of life. Your religion gives you a specific way of life, how to live. Many times we are told what others and how others would like us to live, even within our own religions. But once we are worshiping God in faith, then what we are inspired to do by God, that becomes a part and a way of our life. Our African brothers and sisters are preparing to celebrate emancipation. And so I want to touch a little bit on that, because sometimes we hear words and many interpretations are put to these words, and we are expected many times to accept the international interpretation of, for example, emancipation. As far as I understand, that word emancipation is not to be found in any of our scriptures. The Christians, the Muslims, the Hindus, that word doesn't exist, emancipation. It therefore means that God didn't find it necessary to have his prophets and his messengers and he himself speak to us about emancipation. The rules and regulations given to us in our religions by our messengers and our prophets are enough rules and regulations that we can follow in order to survive in this life without discrimination. For discrimination is the hindrance of emancipation. You cannot discriminate and emancipate at the same time. And so in societies like ours, where we find there is so much discrimination, but yet still in the midst of all this discrimination, there is a celebration of emancipation. You know, emancipation many times is linked to the abolition of slavery, where we are programmed to concentrate on the fact that our foreparents, those of us who are African descent, that our foreparents who were brought as slaves, and because of the so-called abolition of slavery, which was given by Abraham Lincoln in the year, I think, 1863, that slavery should be abolished. But you see, what did slavery entail? Slavery entailed harassment, murder, rape, killing of all sorts, torture, hanging. And so when that was abolished, when slavery was abolished, it would have been natural to think that the people who were slaves would not have to undergo that type of treatment anymore by those people who portrayed themselves as masters. That's what the slaves used to have to call them, master. So they were the slave masters. Now that was the type of slavery that was brutal, but all types of slavery is brutal. There are no types of slavery that is not brutal. We have slavery that is practiced in our own homes. Children who are brutalized by their parents, husbands who brutalize their wives, enslave their wives, enslave their children. Some of them are enslaved themselves by their children and by their wives and so on. So it's a very broad sense of what slavery adds up to and what emancipation means to those of us who feel to ourselves that we are free. For that is what is portrayed in the whole act of emancipation, that we have then gained freedom. You see, there is a singer, Bob Marley, as I know him to be, who said, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, for no one can save us except we ourselves." No one can teach us how to be emancipated. Emancipation is a feeling of righteousness, meaning that things that we see that affect us, and we feel that it's not right, then we need to make it right. And in making it right, that's emancipating ourselves. So brothers and sisters, it's a very broad theme, and those among us, especially among the people of African descent that will be celebrating emancipation in the form of being set free from physical slavery. But there is that mental slavery that still hangs over the people of African descent especially. The mental slavery is hanging over the heads of all those who are dependent upon a system that enslaves people. And most of the time, poor people, disabled people are the victims of that type of slavery. And that is why we have millions of hungry children in the world, millions of people who are living in conditions of disease, millions of mentally deranged and psychologically deranged people. And in all our countries we have them. And then there are those who profess that they are there as leaders to help to rectify such situations. But you know, the slave master always promises the slave good things. The slave master has a way of being able to keep the slaves under control by promising them good things and a better life. And so, brothers and sisters, when we celebrate emancipation, which I myself feel that if it's got to be celebrated, then it should be celebrated in a very solemn, religious manner, giving thanks to God for the strength of our foreparents that have gone through that kind of slavery, both physical and mental, and have emancipated themselves to the extent that we are here today as descendants of people of African descent, to be able to still speak and to do things and to make history in whatever we do, sport, science, religion, and whatever else, thanks to the emancipation of our foreparents, of our ancestors. You see, and if we understand that, then we know what our duties are as people who are coming from a people who emancipated themselves to bring us to this point, and that we have got to emancipate ourselves to bring our children to the next point. If that is the basis of the emancipation celebration, then I can understand and I can link with it. But however you choose to celebrate your emancipation, and the feeling that you have and the thoughts and the perception and the vision that you have as a people of African descent in terms of what emancipation means, however you decide to celebrate it in whatever way. I hope and wish you all a blessed emancipation. As I said before when I started out, is that that word is not found in any one of our scriptures. God didn't find that it was necessary to utilize that word, emancipation, for we might not have understood what it meant until we have gone through the whole barrage and still going through the whole barrage of discrimination and racism. Brothers and sisters, we are still faced with the dreadful disease, and again, it would have been so enlightening if we were to be able to deal with the emancipation of our foreparents, our ancestors, and the teachings that we have received in order to fight and to conquer this so-called COVID-19. Why I'm saying that is because we are being led into taking and administering to ourselves vaccines that we hardly know about. But again, that has come from the descendants of the slave masters. So it is very difficult for us to put trust into people who has a history of enslaving others, mistreating and maltreating others, with the whole lecture of wanting to help us. Now, our ethnic groups in this country, our ancestral links, have got medicines, traditional and indigenous medicines, that are so beneficial in fighting and getting rid of this terror, this weapon of mass destruction, this chemical weapon that is being used. But because of discrimination and lack of emancipation, our medical field are not able to visualize and understand that there are enough traditional medicines, enough herbal preparations, if given the chance and if not discriminated against. You see, remember I said, once you discriminate, you can't emancipate. So there is no way that the medicinal emancipation can come about to realize and understand that Almighty God has given us the cures for all the illnesses that we have, and that 90% of the drugs that are manufactured, the chemical drugs, which includes the vaccines as well, derive their properties from plants, from the same plants and herbs that we have here to use. Now, if we view the situation in terms of the large countries that are affected with COVID, you will find that out of all of them, China has introduced her indigenous herbs and her indigenous plants to fight and to conquer this terrible and dreadful disease. China has done it. But in our countries, we are not emancipated enough to accept and to understand that one hand cannot clap, and to discriminate against those of us who have got the knowledge of the application of traditional and indigenous medicine that will be able to help and to assist as it is doing right now. There are remedies that are available and that are being used, but they are not being recognized by the medicinal authorities, which is an act of discrimination. You're telling me that to use my plants, to use my herbs, to use my barks, to use the knowledge handed down to me by my ancestors as to how to deal with these types of illnesses, you're telling me that that is of no use. You're telling me that your vaccine is what has to be used, and that my traditional medicines and my indigenous herbs and my indigenous roots and plants and barks are not valuable. You are discriminating against the medicine that I use and that I've been taught to use and that I've been using for centuries, that you're calling alternative medicine. How can our herbs and our barks be alternative? Our herbs and our barks and our plants and our flowers and our trees, that's the first medicine on this earth. All other medicines are alternative because they derive their properties from those same plants and those same herbs traditionally. So the herbs and the plants are the real true medicines, and those extracts that they have taken to use to make their antibiotics and their other types of drugs, that's the alternative medicine. You see, brothers and sisters, I don't blame them because they are not emancipated enough to understand that the people believe in their herbs. The people believe in their indigenous medicines. The people are still using it, and the people are protecting themselves. But what you're saying to us is, what you are doing is not good for you. Your tradition that you're using, your traditional medicine, your herbs, your rituals that you're using, it's not good for you. What they should be saying is your rituals and your herbs and your indigenous medicine that you're using, we don't know it. We don't understand it. So we cannot allow it. That's the truth. They have no idea of how this medicine really works, except those of us who utilize and administer indigenous and traditional medicine. So as it's a state of discrimination. And I said, once you discriminate, you can't emancipate. And once you're dealing with the people who are not emancipated, then you're dealing with a set of ignorance all the time. And when things are done in an ignorant manner, it is damaging. There are those among us who are afraid to take the vaccine because they feel that if they take this vaccine, it will shorten their lives. Yet still, you're telling these people to take it. You are forcing these people to take it. So you're forcing these people who believe that they may die if they take it to commit self-suicide. Because you feel that the indigenous herbs and plants that they are using is not as good as your vaccine? Who gives you the authority to judge the medicinal value of the traditional plants and indigenous plants that Almighty God has given to us to use, to utilize for our health, for our welfare? Do you know how many poor people cannot afford to go to the doctor, but they're still alive and they're fighting their illnesses? Do you know how many millions of people are kept alive on this planet through indigenous and traditional medicines? Our clinic deals exclusively with that type of medicine, and so does other clinics. And we invite you to reach out to us if you would like the necessary information that we have to give you in order to assist and help in combating this disease if you're not desirous of taking the vaccine. We are not speaking against anyone who wants to take the vaccine, but we are saying that it has not been authorized by certain institutions that we expect it to be authorized. We do not know the origin of it, and we do not know the side effects of it, and we cannot understand how come we are using or we are making 10 different vaccines for one illness. Well, brothers and sisters, there are 10,000 herbs for one illness that can be used. There are thousands of herbs and indigenous plants that can be used. And like I said, if you are following the trend, you will find that things have cooled down in China quite a lot, because they have applied their traditional and their indigenous medicines and have not just relied on vaccines. See, brothers and sisters, one has to be emancipated enough to understand and not to continuously live in ignorance that causes oppression and causes mental and physical slavery. Something that we need to get away from and to move away from. For you are pushing people to administer things to themselves that they are afraid of. And then you're saying if they don't administer it to themselves, then they are a threat to those who have taken it. And when we know that all the herbs and the plants and the traditional medicines have been given by God to sustain us, not to be a threat, but to sustain us, to boost our immune systems, our fruits, our plants, our herbs, our wheats and barleys and rice and whatever else, vegetables, ground provision, all those things have been given to us, and we are utilizing those things to keep ourselves alive. And then you're saying, because we don't take your vaccine, we are a threat. Who is the biggest threat? Look at yourself and become emancipated and understand that God has provided for us all the things that we need. And He has provided for you too, because a lot of the medicines that you are administering to people are coming from plants and from herbs. This is something that you need to know.
Man create his own monster, weapons of damnation and disaster, no sign at all of human rights. The day has turned into night. Is racialism so, and segregation so? Which way is left to go? I
and sisters, the little time that I have left, we want to stick, and I would like to continue to stick on the emancipation. You know, we went through the emancipation of the slaves and emancipation of the medical world, discrimination, and we look over our world and we see the political atmosphere in all our countries. We see that people are becoming poorer and poorer. We see more diseases. We see more poverty. We see more ill treatment of our elderly. We see our children naked, hungry, all over. And all our governments are supposed to be emancipated people. How can our world be the way it is if it is run by people who are supposed to be emancipated? What should we understand when we select and elect people and we have a parliament that we look towards, because the parliament is the government and they're supposed to be people who are emancipated. And when we look at the behavior, the attitude, the mudslinging, the blaming, then we wonder to ourselves, what is really the meaning that those people have attached to the word emancipation? And our children pick that up, our young people go along with it, and it's being taught in our educational institutions. And we must ask ourselves, if those people are the people who are emancipated and are supposed to be teaching us how to emancipate ourselves, then I refer again to what Bob Marley says. No one but us can emancipate ourselves. Nobody can emancipate you, brothers and sisters. If you don't make an effort to emancipate yourself, and you look towards people who claim to be emancipated and who behave in a manner that you yourself know can never be an example of what emancipation is supposed to be. When we look as a people of African descent at our foreparents who were in chains, who were able to release themselves from those chains, in this country, for example, and who were able to get together, gather themselves together and buy villages after the so-called Emancipation Proclamation. Buy villages. And you know, they bought villages with one transport. Now, if there are 118 slaves, you can't put 118 slave names on a transport. So what did they do as a people? Look at how emancipated they were. They picked out 3 people from among themselves. And they allowed those 3 people to be on the transport so that the whole village can have people. I wonder, brothers and sisters, if among our people of African descent in this year, 2021, would be able to do that. If 118 people of African descent, black people, get a piece of land and say, well, okay, 3 of you take the transport. That's hardly possible today because we are not emancipated. And we did not learn the emancipation of our ancestors and our foreparents. We were taught the colonial art of emancipation and what emancipation is supposed to be. And we are still being taught emancipation in the political arena all over the world. And we are seeing the results of that kind of emancipation that is dealing with discrimination in every aspect of our lives. I am sure that if the discrimination against indigenous medicine was not like that, and if our health system and our health authorities would call our indigenous doctors together to find out what they use, what can be used along with their so-called vaccines, but what can be used for those people who do not want to have vaccines. There are things, no, but the discrimination is that that is no good. The vaccine is better. Well, those who think that way must understand that if you're forcing people to do something to themselves that they feel will harm them, but they have to do it because of circumstances, then you are forcing people to commit suicide. You know, brothers and sisters, there are those who you would not be able to force, and those you are declaring war. For to be emancipated is to be able to determine for yourself what is good for you and what you feel is not good for you. Once you're able to reach that stage of understanding, then you are emancipated, regardless of who might feel that you are not. That's the truth, brothers and sisters, and the truth is the truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. May Almighty God bless each and every one of you, keep you for this weekend, and help you to understand that in every little thing you do that is pleasing to you and that is pleasing to your God, the more you emancipate yourself. And don't allow anybody to tell you what is good for you, what is good for your family, and what you should do in order to save your own life. We already know that our foreparents did it, our ancestors did it, and we know how to do it. For the truth is the truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Assalamu alaikum. Brothers and sisters, practical experience is the greatest teacher. Memory is the greatest truth. And ingratitude, ungratefulness, is the greatest sin. Remember that.
Breaking down is a whole big runaround. A lot of talk is what goes on, while the world is left to mourn. Starvation taking toll, weapons out of control. The atmosphere is cold, so cold. Oh Lord, tell me, what about love thy neighbor? Tell me, what about he ain't heavy, he's my brother. Nobody cares a damn anymore. All they got on their mind is war, war. Tell me, what about equal rights and justice? Tell me, We making new laws every